He thought she vanished forever after that bloody night in Naples when the ambush took everything from him but his name. 3 years later, he's a feared Mafia boss with a heart turned to stone. Then a nurse drops an envelope during a hospital visit and ultrasound with his name scrawled on it. The world around him blurs. His hands shake. The woman he buried in memory carried his child, and she's been hiding in plain sight under a new name, working for the enemy. Tonight, he won't leave without answers. Or without her. Rain hammered the cobblestones of Naples like bullets. Matteo Romano pressed his back against the wet brick wall, feeling the vibration of distant thunder merge with the pounding in his chest. His gun felt heavy. Too heavy. The warehouse across the street glowed with amber light, shadows moving behind grimy windows. "They're waiting for us," Vincent muttered beside him, wiping rain from his face. "This feels wrong." Matteo knew wrong. Wrong was the silence on his encrypted phone for the past hour. Wrong was the way his boss, Donato Salvatore, had smiled when giving him this assignment. Wrong was the metallic taste in his mouth that had nothing to do with fear. "We go in," Matteo said. His voice didn't shake. It never did. The warehouse door exploded inward under Vincent's kick. Matteo moved through the smoke, weapon raised, every nerve screaming. Empty crates, dust, the smell of gasoline and something else. Something chemical. Then he saw them. 6 men, not from the rival family they were supposed to meet. These were Donato's men. His own people. Vincent fell first. The gunshot tore through the rain sound, and Matteo watched his friend crumple. No time to think. He fired back, diving behind a steel beam, as bullets chewed through wood and metal. His shoulder exploded in pain. Warm blood soaked his shirt. In the chaos, he saw her. Elena stood in the doorway, her medical bag clutched to her chest, eyes wide with horror. She'd been waiting outside as always, ready to patch them up after negotiations. But this wasn't negotiation. This was execution. "Elena, run!" He roared the words, but she froze. A support beam groaned above her head. The explosion came from nowhere and everywhere. Matteo felt the world lift and slam him down. Concrete dust filled his lungs. Through ringing ears, he heard screaming. His? Hers? When he dragged himself toward where she'd been standing, he found only rubble and a spreading pool of crimson that reflected the flames. Her silver necklace lay in the debris, the one he'd given her on their first anniversary. The delicate chain was broken, covered in dust and blood. Matteo's fingers closed around it, and something inside him shattered more completely than the building around him. He crawled through the wreckage, shouting her name until his voice gave out. The sirens grew louder. Hands pulled him back, away from the flames. Someone was saying she was gone, the body unrecoverable, the fire too hot. Later, in a safe house with his wounds bandaged, Matteo stared at the necklace in his palm. Rain still drummed against the windows. He could still smell the smoke in his hair, taste the concrete dust, feel the phantom weight of her absence. Donato visited him once. The old man's eyes were cold, calculating. "Tragic accident," he said. "The girl was in the wrong place. You survived. That's what matters." But Matteo understood. Elena had seen too much, known too much. Her death was the price of his betrayal, a betrayal he hadn't even committed. Donato had tested his loyalty, and Elena had paid for the test. "I'm done," Matteo said, his voice hollow. Donato smiled. "No one is ever done, boy. But you want revenge? I can give you that. Kill the men who set the trap. Rise in my ranks. Become untouchable. Then you can grieve." Matteo looked at the necklace again. Elena's face flashed through his mind, her laugh, her gentle hand stitching his wounds, her whispered promises of a future away from all this blood. "Make me your weapon," he said. "And when I'm strong enough, I'll burn everyone who took her from me." The old man's smile widened. "Good. Your sentimental heart just died in that warehouse, Romano. Now you can finally be useful." That night, Matteo held the necklace against his chest and felt nothing. The rain had washed away the last of who he used to be. What remained was anger, sharp and cold as a blade. He would climb to the top of this empire of blood, and then he would make them all pay. But deep in the darkness, in a place he refused to acknowledge, a question whispered. What if she had lived? What if, in those final moments before the explosion, she'd had something to tell him? Something important? He crushed the thought before it could take root. The dead kept no secrets. Elena was gone. And Matteo Romano, the man who had loved her, died in that warehouse too. 3 years carved different men from broken boys. Matteo Romano became stone. His office overlooked the Bay of Naples, floor-to-ceiling windows framing a city that now bent to his will. Donato Salvatore had died 18 months ago, a heart attack, the doctors said, though certain people knew about the digitalis in his morning espresso. The old man had taught Matteo well: trust nothing, control everything, and bury your weaknesses, so deep even you can't find them. Now Matteo controlled the docks, the unions, the politicians, and the fear that kept Naples orderly. At 32, he was the youngest mafia boss in southern Italy, and the most ruthless. His tailored suits cost more than most men earned in a year, but beneath the silken wool, scars mapped a history of violence. The shipment from Marseille is delayed. His consigliere, Marcus Donovan, reported from the doorway. American by birth, Marcus had brought efficiency and cold calculation to the organization. Custom inspections. Our contact needs more convincing. Double the amount. Wire it tonight. Matteo didn't look up from the ledger on his desk. Numbers were cleaner than bodies, more honest than words. And Marcus? Fire whoever gave you bad intelligence about the inspection schedule. Literally. Marcus nodded once. Understood. Also, the Santoro family sent another proposal for the territory in Salerno. Tell them to try again when they learn basic arithmetic. Their offer is an insult. They won't like that. Then they can die unhappy. Matteo finally raised his eyes. Anything else? The hospital gala. Tonight. You promised to attend. It's the children's wing you funded. Matteo's jaw tightened. The hospital. He'd built it as a monument to ghosts, poured millions into pediatric care because some irrational part of him remembered Elena's dream of healing children. She'd talked about it constantly, eyes bright with impossible hope. The hospital carried her initials in the foundation name, hidden where only he could see. Elena's Light Foundation. I'll make an appearance. 1 hour, then I'm out. The director will appreciate it. Dr. Castellano says your generosity saved 30 children this year alone. The words meant nothing. Matteo saved no one. He simply threw money at the bleeding wound where his conscience used to be. Every child that lived was another small rebellion against the universe that had taken Elena. But he felt no satisfaction, no warmth. Only the cold certainty that nothing could ever be enough. His penthouse apartment was a mausoleum of expensive minimalism. White walls, black furniture, no photographs, no memories. The only color came from a single painting, abstract, violent reds and deep blues that Elena had loved. He'd bought it for her birthday, planned to surprise her. It had arrived 2 days after her death. Matteo poured whiskey, stood at the window watching the city lights blur and sharpen. Sleep was rare, dreams rarer. When they came, he was always back in that warehouse, always reaching for her through smoke and rubble, always too late. He'd wake with her necklace clutched in his fist, the silver chain leaving impressions on his palm. The necklace lived in his pocket now, a talisman, a punishment. You made me this, he told the empty room, told her ghost. You died, and I became what I needed to be. No weaknesses, no mercy. Isn't that what survival requires? The city didn't answer. It never did. At the hospital gala, Matteo moved through crowds of donors and doctors with practiced detachment. He shook hands, accepted gratitude, signed checks. Doctor Castellano, gray-haired and kind-eyed, gripped his arm with real emotion. Mr. Romano, you should see the new wing. The children's murals, the equipment, it's beyond anything we imagined. You're saving lives. I write checks, doctor. You save lives. Still, I wish you'd visit more often. See the faces behind the numbers. Matteo extracted himself politely and moved toward the exit. He'd fulfilled his obligation. But near the elevator bank, something made him pause. A nurse hurried past, arms full of files, her hair falling from a loose bun. Something about her profile, the curve of her neck, triggered a memory so visceral he couldn't breathe. Elena. But when she turned, it was just another tired healthcare worker. Brown hair instead of Elena's dark auburn, different nose, different chin. Matteo released the breath he'd been holding, disgusted with himself. 3 years, and his mind still conjured phantoms. He rode the elevator down, tried to shake the feeling crawling up his spine. The feeling that something had shifted, that fate had just turned its attention his way. He hated superstition, hated the irrational, but his hand found Elena's necklace in his pocket, and he held it like a drowning man holds driftwood. The city sprawled below as his car navigated toward the harbor. Somewhere out there, Enemies plotted. Rivals schemed. Money flowed through dirty channels while he sat atop an empire built on blood and broken promises. This was power. This was success. Then why did he feel like he'd lost everything that mattered? Matteo returned to the hospital the following week. He told himself it was business reviewing the new equipment installation, meeting with administrators about expansion. But he knew the truth. That nurse, that ghost. He walked the corridors of the pediatric wing, observed the bright murals painted on walls, the laughter of children in recovery. A little girl waved at him from her bed, tubes and monitors surrounding her like a mechanical garden. He nodded back, uncomfortable with her innocent trust. Then he saw her again. She stood at the nurse's station, head bent over charts, that same loose bun barely containing her hair. From behind, the resemblance was crushing. Same height, same slender frame, same way she tilted her head when concentrating. Matteo's heart hammered against his ribs, a sensation he'd thought burned out of him. He approached slowly, each step measured. "Excuse me." She turned, and the world stopped. Eyes, green with flecks of gold, exactly like Elena's. But everything else was different. Fuller cheeks, slightly wider nose, hair a shade lighter. Not Elena. Couldn't be Elena. Elena was dead, buried under rubble and fire. "Can I help you?" Her voice. Christ. Even her voice carried echoes of memory. "I'm Matteo Romano. I fund this hospital." His own voice sounded distant, strange. "Oh, Mr. Romano." She smiled, professional and warm. "Anna Rossi. I've heard wonderful things about your generosity. The children adore the new playroom." Anna Rossi. A common name. Meaningless. But those eyes. "How long have you worked here?" "About 6 months. I transferred from a clinic in Rome." She glanced at her watch. "I'm sorry. I have medications to distribute. Was there something specific you needed?" "No. Just." "Meeting the staff." He stepped back, let her pass. She smiled again, polite and distant, and disappeared around the corner. Matteo stood frozen. Logic screamed at him. Coincidence. Nothing more. Italy was full of women with green eyes. But instinct, the same instinct that had kept him alive through a dozen assassination attempts, whispered something else. He spent the next hour wandering the hospital, pretending to inspect facilities while actually tracking Anna Rossi's movements. She was efficient, gentle with patients, laughing with elderly doctors and singing to crying children. Nothing in her behavior suggested deception. She was exactly what she appeared, a dedicated nurse living an ordinary life. But then, in the third-floor corridor, she stopped at a water fountain, set down her armful of files to drink. The stack wobbled, papers scattered across the floor. Matteo moved to help automatically, gathering charts and forms. One page caught his eye. An ultrasound image, grainy and technical. But at the top, in blue ink, someone had written, "Father, Matteo Romano." Time fractured. The hospital sounds beeping monitors. Distant conversations. Squeaking wheels became underwater noises, muffled and strange. Matteo stared at the image. A tiny form, barely visible, dated 3 years and 2 months ago. His hands began to shake. "Oh God," Anna's voice, sharp with panic. She snatched at the ultrasound, but Matteo held it out of reach. Their eyes met, and he saw it now. The terror, the recognition, the desperate calculation of someone whose secret had just exploded. "Who are you?" His voice came out hoarse, barely controlled. "I'm nobody. Please, give that back. This has my name on it." Each word felt like swallowing glass. "This date is from 3 years ago. You said you're Anna Rossi, but please." Tears welled in those devastating green eyes. "Not here. If you ever cared about anyone, please, not here." The surrounding staff were starting to notice. Matteo forced his expression neutral, handed back the papers with rigid control. "Tonight. The cafe on Via Toledo, 9 o'clock. You'll be there." It wasn't a question. She clutched the ultrasound to her chest, nodded once, and fled. Matteo watched her go, his entire world tilting on its axis. Impossible. But that image, his name, those eyes. He made it to his car before the shaking turned violent, gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles bleached white. 3 years. If Elena had been pregnant. If she'd somehow survived. If she'd hidden from him. From everyone. Carrying his child. The implications were a knife twisting in his chest. He'd mourned her, killed for her memory, built an empire on the ashes of his grief. And if she'd been alive this entire time? Betrayal mixed with hope, mixed with rage, mixed with something he couldn't name. Matteo pulled Elena's necklace from his pocket, stared at the tarnished silver. All this time, he'd carried her death like a cross. What if death had been the lie? His phone rang. Marcus, with some emergency that suddenly meant nothing. Matteo ignored it. Stared at the hospital entrance until a small figure in blue scrubs emerged, climbed into a battered sedan, and drove away. He followed at a distance, something feral waking in his chest. The car led him to a modest apartment complex in a working-class neighborhood. She parked, glanced around nervously, and went inside. Matteo sat in his car until dark, watching her window. A light came on. Shadows moved behind curtains. Ordinary, peaceful. The kind of life Elena had wanted, far from bullets and blood. The kind of life she'd apparently built, without him. At 9 o'clock, he would get his answers. And depending on those answers, the world might burn again. Because if she'd faked her death, if she'd taken his child and hidden, if she'd let him suffer 3 years of guilt and grief, Matteo didn't know what he'd do, but it would be biblical. The cafe on Via Toledo was small, tucked between a bookstore and a wine shop. Matteo arrived early, took a table in the back corner where he could watch the door. Rain had started again, drumming against the windows in familiar rhythm. Naples drowned in autumn storms, and tonight the deluge matched his mood. She came at exactly 9 o'clock, wearing jeans and a dark jacket, hair down now, falling past her shoulders. From across the cafe, the resemblance to Elena was staggering. But this woman moved differently, cautious, hunted, scanning the room before entering. Their eyes met. She flinched but came forward, slid into the chair across from him. Up close, the differences were clearer. Tiny lines at her eyes that hadn't been there before. A thin scar at her hairline. Hands that trembled as she set them on the table. "Anna isn't your real name," Matteo said quietly. "No." Her voice was barely audible. "Say your real name. I want to hear you say it." She closed her eyes. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Elena Martinelli. The confirmation still hit like a bullet. Matteo's breath caught. For 3 years he'd talked to her ghost, bargained with her memory, built monuments to her absence. And she'd been alive. Breathing, walking, living a life he knew nothing about. The explosion, he managed. They said your body. There was no body. I was blown clear, into the alley. Unconscious but alive. When I woke up, she opened her eyes, and the pain there was old, deep. You were gone. The police were everywhere. And I realized someone had tried to kill both of us, not the rival family, our people. Donato. I didn't know names then, but I knew I was pregnant, Matteo. 8 weeks pregnant with your child. And if someone wanted us dead, they'd certainly want the baby dead too. Pregnant. His child. The words were rocks in his throat. You never told me. I was going to. That night, I had the test results in my bag. Was waiting for you to finish the job so we could talk. I wanted it to be perfect. Wanted to see your face when I told you we were going to be parents. Her voice cracked. Then everything exploded, and all I could think was, save the baby, run, hide, survive. Matteo's hands clenched on the table. You let me think you were dead. For 3 years. I didn't let you do anything. I was terrified, alone, bleeding from shrapnel wounds. I changed my name, dyed my hair, moved to Rome, had my baby in a clinic where no one asked questions. And every day, every single day, I wondered if you were alive, if you were looking for me, if you blamed me for that night. I blamed myself, he said harshly. I blamed myself for getting you killed. I became a monster to avenge you. Everything I've done, every person I've hurt, it was because I thought you were dead. And if I'd come back, with a baby, to that world? Elena's laugh was bitter. They would have killed us both to get to you, or you would have been killed protecting us. Either way, our child grows up without a father. I made a choice, Matteo. The only choice I could make. The logic was sound. Matteo understood survival, understood the calculations of life and death. But understanding didn't stop the rage burning through his veins. You should have trusted me. Trust the man who worked for Donato Salvatore? Who came home covered in blood and wouldn't tell me why? I loved you, Matteo. God help me. I loved you so much it terrified me. But I didn't trust your world. And I was right not to. Where is the child? His voice was ice. Where is our baby? Elena's whole body tensed. Safe. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I'm giving until I know you won't. She stopped herself. Won't what? Hurt you? Steal the child? Matteo leaned forward. You think I'm a monster? I think you're a mafia boss who kills people for a living. I've seen the news, Matteo. I know what you've become. The Matteo I loved was conflicted, trying to find a way out. You're in deeper than ever. He wanted to argue, but couldn't. She was right. He'd drowned himself in blood and power, convinced it was justice. Now, looking at the woman he'd mourned, seeing the fear in her eyes when she looked at him, Matteo realized what he'd lost beyond just her presence. He'd lost who he could have been. I need to see my child, he said, forcing his voice steady. Boy or girl? Boy. His name is Luca. Luca. His son. Matteo's throat tightened. I've missed 3 years of his life. I know, and I'm sorry for that. But I'm not sorry I kept him safe. Elena's hands were steady now. If you want to meet him, there are rules. No weapons. No guards. Just you. And if he's scared, if he seems uncomfortable, you leave immediately. You think I'd hurt my own son? I think you live a violent life, and I won't expose Luca to violence. Those are the terms, Matteo. Take them or leave them. He should have been angry, should have demanded, threatened, used every tool in his considerable arsenal to bend her to his will. But looking at Elena alive, fierce, protecting their child with the same determination she'd once used to stitch his wounds and beg him to leave the life, Matteo felt something else. Shame. I'll agree to your terms, he said quietly. But Elena, this isn't over. We have 3 years to account for, and whether you like it or not, I'm that boy's father. I have rights. You have responsibilities, she corrected. Rights are earned. She stood, preparing to leave. Matteo caught her wrist gently. She froze, and he felt her pulse racing under his fingers. Still afraid of him, still keeping distance even as she let him touch her. I never stopped loving you, he said. The admission cost him. I buried my heart in that warehouse, thought it died with you. Everything after was just going through motions. Elena's eyes filled with tears again. Don't make this about us. It's always been about us. There is no us anymore. There's you and me, and a little boy who deserves better than what we've become. She pulled her wrist free. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock. I'll send you the address. She left before he could respond. Matteo sat in the cafe, watching rain streak the windows, feeling the shape of his world reform around this impossible truth. Elena was alive. He had a son, and everything he'd built, every piece of armor he'd constructed, was suddenly, catastrophically, useless. Outside, lightning split the sky. Thunder followed, shaking the windows. And Matteo Romano, who had stopped believing in anything beyond power and revenge, found himself whispering a prayer to whoever might listen. Don't let me destroy them. Whatever I've become, don't let me destroy them. The address Elena sent led to a neighborhood Matteo knew only from maps. Working class, quiet, where shopkeepers swept sidewalks and grandmothers hung laundry from balconies. No one here knew his name or feared it. He'd worn jeans and a plain jacket, left his usual security detail behind. Per Elena's rules. The apartment building was modest. 4 stories of aging brick with window boxes full of geraniums. Matteo climbed to the 3rd floor, his heart doing strange things in his chest. He'd faced down armed men without this much anxiety. But standing outside door 3B, about to meet his son, terror was the only word that fit. Elena opened the door before he could knock. She'd been watching for him. He's napping, she said quietly. We have a few minutes. The apartment was small but warm. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator. Toys were organized in colorful bins. Books lined makeshift shelves. Everything spoke of careful choices made on a tight budget. Love poured into creating safety. Matteo took in the details. Elena's nursing textbooks, a coffee mug that said "World's Best Mom," framed photos of a dark-haired boy at various ages. His son, growing up in these pictures while Matteo had been completely unaware of his existence. He looks like you, Elena said, following his gaze. Same eyes, same stubborn chin. He's smart, curious, asks 1,000 questions, loves dinosaurs and refuses to eat anything green. Does he know about me? He knows his father had to work far away. That you didn't know about him, but if you did, you would have come. Her voice was soft. I never wanted him to think you didn't care. I didn't know, Matteo said, the words harsh. If I'd known, nothing would have stopped me from finding you both. A door creaked open. Matteo turned, and there he was. Luca was small, sleep-rumpled, clutching a stuffed dinosaur. Dark hair stuck up in all directions. But the eyes, Matteo's gray eyes, were alert, cautious, taking in this stranger in his home. Mama? The boy's voice was uncertain. It's okay, baby. Elena went to him, crouched down to his level. Remember how I said your papa might visit? This is him. This is Matteo. Luca studied Matteo seriously. 3 years old, but something ancient lived in that gaze. Some instinct that recognized blood. You're really my papa? Matteo's throat closed. He knelt, bringing himself to the boy's eye level. Yes, I'm really your papa. Mama said you were far away. I was, but I'm here now. Luca considered this. Then, with the mercurial mood of small children, he smiled. I have a dinosaur. Wanna see? The tension broke. Matteo felt his chest decompress. I'd love to see your dinosaur. What followed was the strangest hour of Matteo's life. He sat on the floor of Elena's tiny living room while his son showed him every toy, explained the complex politics of his stuffed animal kingdom, and demonstrated how high he could jump. Elena watched from the kitchen, arms crossed, protective but not interfering. Luca was fearless in the way only children could be, accepting Matteo's presence without the weight of their history. When he climbed into Matteo's lap to read a book about a T-Rex, something fundamental shifted in Matteo's chest. This was his child, his blood, a whole person who existed because of one night with Elena, because of love that had burned so bright it left this impossible gift behind. You're crying, Luca observed, tilting his head. Matteo hadn't realized. He touched his cheek, felt the wetness. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're happy. Are you happy? Yes. The truth of it stunned him. I'm very happy to meet you. Luca beamed, then launched into another story about dinosaurs. Matteo listened, memorizing the sound of his son's voice, the weight of him, the absolute trust radiating from this small person who didn't know yet to be afraid. When Elena declared it bedtime, Luca hugged Matteo without hesitation. Will you come back? Every day, Matteo promised. If your mama allows it, I'll come back every single day. Luca grinned and ran to his bedroom. Elena lingered in the hallway, waiting. Matteo stood, feeling like someone had reached into his chest and rearranged everything. Thank you, he said quietly, for letting me meet him. He needed to know you, and you needed to know him. Elena's expression was carefully neutral. But this doesn't change anything between us. It changes everything. Matteo, I have a son, Elena. A son who needs me, whether you think I'm worthy or not. And I'm not the same man who walked away from that warehouse. I've done terrible things, yes. But I'm still capable of being a father. Let me prove it. She studied him for a long moment. One visit at a time. We'll see. It wasn't permission, but it wasn't refusal either. Matteo would take it. As he left the apartment, descending into the cooling night, his phone buzzed with ignored messages. Business. Crisis. The empire demanding his attention. But for the first time in 3 years, those demands felt distant, unimportant. He'd found something worth more than power. Worth more than revenge. A reason to be something other than the monster he'd become. His son, his family, his chance at redemption, and he would protect them with everything he had, even if that meant protecting them from himself. For 2 weeks, Matteo lived a double life. By day, he was the ruthless boss managing shipments, negotiating territories, eliminating problems. By evening, he was a father learning how to build block towers and make sound effects for toy cars. Luca accepted him completely, with the easy adaptability of children. "Papa's here!" became the boy's favorite phrase, shouted with joy whenever Matteo arrived. And each time, Matteo felt the frozen parts of himself thaw a little more. Elena remained cautious. She supervised their visits, enforced rules, kept her distance. But Matteo caught her watching sometimes, her expression unreadable, as if trying to reconcile the man playing dinosaurs with the Mafia boss she read about in newspapers. "He's happy," she admitted one evening, after Luca was asleep. They sat at her small kitchen table, coffee cooling between them. "I haven't seen him this happy well, ever. Children need fathers. They need good fathers." I'm still not convinced you can be that while running a criminal empire. Matteo wanted to argue, but Marcus's call interrupted. He excused himself, stepped into the hallway. We have a problem, Marcus said without preamble. Carlo Russo is back in Naples. The name hit like ice water. Carlo Russo Donato's former enforcer, the one who'd helped set the warehouse trap 3 years ago. Matteo had been hunting him for years, but Carlo had gone underground, disappeared into the European criminal network. Where? Our contacts spotted him at the docks. He's meeting with the Santoro family. They're planning something. Matteo's jaw clenched. Find him. I want eyes on him every second, and double the security on all our operations. Already done. But Matteo. He's asking about that nurse. The one from the hospital. Someone's been feeding him information. The world tilted. What information? That you've been visiting her? That you care about her? Marcus paused. If Carlo knows about Elena, if he figures out she's alive and you have a connection, he'll use them as leverage. Matteo finished the thought, cold spreading through his chest. Or kill them to hurt me. Either way, they're targets. He ended the call, stood frozen in the hallway. His past had finally caught up, and it was coming for the only things that mattered. Elena and Luca were exposed because of him. Because he hadn't been careful enough, hadn't considered that his enemies might be watching. Elena appeared in the doorway. What's wrong? We need to talk. He pulled her back inside, closed the door, checked the windows. Someone from my past knows about you. A man named Carlo Russo. He's dangerous, and he has reason to hurt me. Her face went white. How dangerous? He helped orchestrate the warehouse ambush. He's a killer, Elena, and he's smart. If he comes after you and Luca... Matteo couldn't finish the sentence. What do we do? You trust me. Right now, immediately. You trust me to keep you both safe. He grabbed his phone, started texting Marcus. I'm moving you to one of my properties. High security, guards, everything. You'll have to stay there until Carlo is dealt with. I can't just leave my job. Your job won't matter if you're dead. The words came out harsher than intended. Matteo forced himself to breathe. Please, I know you don't trust me fully. I know I'm part of a world you hate, but I will not let anything happen to our son. Pack essentials. We leave in 20 minutes. Elena's hands shook, but she nodded. Luca's asleep. If we wake him, I'll carry him. Just pack. They moved quickly, quietly. Elena threw clothes and necessities into a bag while Matteo stood watch. His gun was in his hand now, safety off, every sense alert. The apartment that had seemed so safe 20 minutes ago now felt exposed, vulnerable, a trap waiting to spring. Marcus arrived with 2 cars and 4 armed men. Matteo carried Luca, the boy still sleeping, wrapped in a blanket. Elena clutched the bag and her son's favorite stuffed dinosaur, her face set in grim determination. The drive to Matteo's estate took 40 minutes. The villa sat on the hills overlooking the bay, surrounded by high walls and sophisticated security. Elena stared at it through the car window, her expression unreadable. This is your home? One of them. Matteo didn't mention the others, the penthouse downtown, the safe houses scattered across the region. You'll be safe here. I promise. Inside, the villa was all marble floors and expensive art. Elena looked small in the vast entryway, clutching her bag like a shield. Luca stirred in Matteo's arms, waking slowly. Papa, where are we? Somewhere safe, buddy. You and Mama are going to stay here for a while. Like a vacation? Exactly like a vacation. Matteo carried him upstairs to a guest room, laid him gently on the bed. Elena tucked him in, sang softly until he drifted back to sleep. Then she followed Matteo into the hallway, closing the door behind her. How long? She asked. Until Carlo is dead. Simple. Final. I won't sugarcoat it, Elena. This is my fault. My life brought danger to yours. But I will fix it. By killing someone. By protecting my family. However necessary. He met her eyes. You can judge me for that. But you can't argue with the results. She was quiet for a long moment. The man I loved wouldn't have said that. The man you loved is dead. I told you that. What's left is someone who will do anything to keep you and Luca safe. Even if it makes you hate me. I don't hate you. Her voice was soft, sad. I hate what you've become. There's a difference. Matteo had no response to that. He showed her to her room, pointed out the security features, the panic buttons, the the guards stationed throughout the property. Then he left her there, alone in luxury that must have felt like a gilded cage. Downstairs, Marcus waited in the study. Carlo's location? Still at the docks. But he's making moves, reaching out to people, asking questions. He knows something, Matteo. Maybe not everything, but enough to be dangerous. Then we move first. Tonight. Gather everyone. I want Carlo dead before sunrise. Marcus hesitated. If we hit him at the docks, we start a war with the Centauros. Then we start a war. Matteo's voice was ice. I will burn this entire city before I let anyone touch my family. Make the calls. As Marcus left to organize the strike team, Matteo stood at the window, looking out at the dark bay. Somewhere out there, Carlo Russo was breathing, planning, threatening, but not for long. Matteo Romano had lost Elena once. He'd mourned her, been destroyed by it, rebuilt himself into something hard and merciless. He wouldn't lose her again. Wouldn't lose Luca. Whatever it took, whatever lines he had to cross, he would eliminate the threat, even if it meant proving Elena right about what he'd become. The strike against Carlo happened 3 nights later. Matteo led 12 men to the warehouse where Carlo was hiding, and what followed was brutal. Gunfire, screaming, blood on concrete. When it ended, 4 of Carlo's associates were dead. But Carlo himself had escaped. He knew we were coming, Marcus reported, fury and frustration in his voice. Someone tipped him off. Then we have a traitor. Matteo wiped blood from his face, not all of it his own. Find them. Make an example. But the failure gnawed at him. Carlo was still out there, still a threat. And until he was dead, Elena and Luca remained in danger. The villa became their prison and sanctuary both. Days stretched into a week. Elena called her hospital, arranged family leave. Luca adapted to his new surroundings with impressive resilience, treating the massive estate like a playground. But Elena grew quieter, more withdrawn. Matteo found her on the terrace one evening, staring at the city lights. You should come inside. It's not safe out here after dark. I'm surrounded by armed guards and walls. When exactly am I safe? She didn't look at him. This is your world, isn't it? Always looking over your shoulder. Always one step from violence. Yes. And you want to bring Luca into this? I want to give him everything I never had. Protection. Resources. A father who actually gives a damn. Matteo moved closer. I know this isn't what you wanted, Elena, but I'm trying. Are you? She finally turned, and he saw tears on her face. Because from where I'm standing, you're just proving I was right to hide. You can't fix this with money or guns or security. You can't protect us from your choices. Then what do you want me to do? Walk away? Pretend Luca isn't mine? His voice rose despite himself. I can't unbe his father. And I can't unbe what I am. I know. That's what terrifies me. The admission hung between them. Matteo stepped closer, close enough to see the pulse in her throat, the way her breath caught, close enough to remember everything they'd been before the world exploded. I still love you, he said quietly. I never stopped. Even when I thought you were dead. Even when I became everything you feared, I loved you. That's the one part of me that didn't die. Don't. Her voice cracked. Don't make this harder. It's already hard. At least, let it be honest. He reached up, wiped a tear from her cheek. She flinched but didn't pull away. Tell me you feel nothing. Tell me you don't remember what we had. If you can say that honestly, I'll never mention it again. Elena closed her eyes. I can't. Then what are we doing? Living separate lives while raising a child together? Pretending we're strangers? His hand slid to her neck, feeling her pulse race. I know I'm not the man you loved anymore, but I'm still a man who loves you. That has to count for something. It counts for everything and nothing at the same time. She opened her eyes, and the pain there was devastating. Loving you destroyed me once, Matteo. I can't survive it again. I won't let you go through that again. You can't promise that. Your life is violence. Sooner or later, it'll swallow all of us. But even as she said it, she was leaning into his touch. And Matteo, who had learned to read body language like others read books, saw the truth she wouldn't speak. She still wanted him. Wanted this. Despite everything, despite reason, despite the fear. He kissed her. Gentle at first, a question more than a demand. She stiffened, then melted, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with 3 years of loneliness and longing. It was desperation and memory and need all tangled together, and Matteo felt the last of his control fracture. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena pressed her forehead to his. "This doesn't fix anything. I know. It probably makes everything worse. Probably. But I've missed you. God, I've missed you so much." They stood there on the terrace, holding each other as night settled over Naples. Inside, their son slept peacefully, unaware of the danger circling or the broken love trying to repair itself. And for a moment, just a moment, Matteo let himself believe it was possible, that he could have this, that he could be both the monster the world required and the man his family needed. But reality came crashing back when his phone buzzed. Marcus, with news that drove ice through his veins. "Carlo knows about the villa, and he's bringing an army." They had less than an hour. Matteo mobilized every resource, pulling guards from other properties, alerting his most trusted soldiers, activating the villa's defensive systems. The estate became a fortress, armed men at every entrance, weapons distributed, escape routes planned. Elena gathered Luca from his bed. The boy was confused, frightened by the sudden urgency. "Papa, what's happening?" "Just a game, buddy. We're going to play hide and seek. Mama's going to take you somewhere safe, and you have to be very, very quiet. Can you do that?" Luca nodded, eyes wide. Elena carried him toward the basement, a reinforced panic room with steel doors and independent power. Matteo followed, helping them inside. The room was stocked for siege. Food, water, medical supplies, communication equipment. Elena looked at it with horrified understanding. "You've prepared for this." "I've prepared for everything." Matteo showed her the controls. "Lock this door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except me or Marcus. If something happens, if you don't hear from me in 12 hours, there's a tunnel. It leads to a garage 2 miles away. Keys to a car are in the wall safe. Code is Luca's birthday." "Matteo, promise me you'll run if you have to. Promise me you'll keep him safe." "What about you?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'll be fine. I've survived worse." It was a lie. They both knew it. But Elena nodded, clutching Luca close. "Don't die. You just came back to us. Don't you dare die." Matteo kissed her once, fierce and desperate. Then he kissed his son's forehead, whispered, "Be brave," and left them. The door sealed behind him with a hydraulic hiss. Final, absolute. Marcus met him in the main hall. 20 men with us, another 12 on perimeter. Carlo's bringing at least 30, maybe more. This is going to get ugly. Let it get ugly. Just keep them away from that basement. The first shots came at midnight. Not from the gate. Carlo was smarter than that. His men came through the gardens, using the trees and shadows for cover. Matteo's guards engaged them, and suddenly the night was full of muzzle flashes and shouting. Matteo fought from the terrace, providing covering fire as his men repositioned. A bullet grazed his arm. Another shattered the window behind him. He ignored the pain, focused on the job. Protect the basement. Protect his family. Nothing else mattered. But Carlo had numbers and strategy. They pushed forward in waves, overwhelming the outer defenses. Matteo's men fell back to the villa itself, turning every room into a battleground. "They're breaking through the east wing," Marcus shouted over the chaos. Matteo moved that direction, killing 2 of Carlo's men who'd made it inside. The villa, his sanctuary, became a war zone. Furniture was shredded by bullets, priceless art destroyed, blood-staining marble floors. He caught sight of Carlo himself, directing troops from the garden. Their eyes met across the chaos, and Carlo smiled, a vicious, triumphant smile that promised pain. Then Carlo pointed, not at the villa, at the basement entrance. "No." The word tore from Matteo's throat. "No." He ran, Marcus on his heels, fighting through Carlo's men. They'd found the panic room, were placing explosives. Matteo opened fire, dropping 3 before his gun clicked empty. He grabbed a fallen rifle, kept shooting, desperation fueling every move. The explosion rocked the villa's foundation. Dust and smoke filled the air. Through the ringing in his ears, Matteo heard screaming. Elena, her voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. He reached the basement in time to see the door twisted, broken, barely hanging on its hinges. Carlo's men were trying to pry it open. Matteo hit them like a hurricane, gun forgotten, just fists and rage and terror. Marcus pulled him off the last man before he could beat him to death. The door's holding. They can't get in. But the relief was short-lived. Carlo appeared through the smoke, gun raised. Matteo Romano. 3 years I've waited for this. You want revenge? Fight me. Leave them alone. Oh, I'm going to kill you. But first, I'm going to take everything you love, the way Donato taught us. Carlo's smile was a wound. Did you really think that old man cared about you? You were always just a tool. And when you outlived your usefulness, he tried to dispose of you. That warehouse? That was his test. You failed. Donato's dead. But his legacy lives on. In me. In this city built on blood. And you thought you could just walk away from it? Have a family? Have peace? Carlo laughed. You chose this world, Romano. You don't get to leave it. He fired. Matteo moved, but not fast enough. The bullet took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He hit the ground, pain exploding through his body. Through blurred vision, he saw Carlo approaching, gun aimed at his head. Then Elena's voice, clear and strong. Get away from him. She stood in the broken doorway, Luca behind her, and she was holding a gun, one of the weapons from the panic room's supplies. Her hands were steady despite the fear in her eyes. Elena, don't. Matteo tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. Carlo turned to her, amused. The little doctor. Donato wanted you dead too, you know. Said you made Romano soft. Guess he was right. I said, get away from him. Or what? You'll shoot me? You're not a killer, sweetheart. You save lives. It's what you do. I also protect what's mine. Elena's finger tightened on the trigger. And you've threatened my family for the last time. She fired. The shot was perfect center mass, exactly where she'd been trained as part of her medical fieldwork to identify vital organs. Carlo's eyes widened in shock. He stumbled, tried to raise his gun, but collapsed. More gunfire erupted outside. Matteo's reinforcements had finally arrived, overwhelming what remained of Carlo's forces. But Matteo barely registered it. He was focused on Elena, standing there with the gun smoking in her hands, face white with shock. Elena. He pushed himself up, ignoring the agony in his shoulder. Elena, look at me. She did, and tears were streaming down her face. I killed him. I killed someone. You saved us. Matteo reached her, pulled her against him with his good arm. You saved all of us. Behind them, Luca began to cry. Elena dropped the gun and ran to him, scooping him up, checking him for injuries. It's okay, baby. It's okay. Mama's here. Papa's here. We're safe now. But as Matteo looked at the destruction around them, the blood, the bodies, the villa turned battlefield, he knew the truth. They weren't safe. They would never be safe as long as he lived this life. And that meant a choice he'd been avoiding for 3 years had finally arrived. Matteo woke in the hospital 3 days later. The bullet had torn through muscle and nicked bone, required surgery and antibiotics and more care than he'd probably deserved. His first clear thought was, Elena and Luca. Marcus answered before he could ask. They're safe. Under guard at a hotel. The villa's being repaired. And Carlo's organization has collapsed completely without him. The threat's over. Anyone else? We lost 6 men. Injured 12 more. But your family is alive. That's what matters, isn't it? It was. But it also wasn't enough. A nurse came to check his vitals, and Matteo recognized her from the hospital Elena worked at. Dr. Castellano sends his regards, she said. He's quite impressed with your nurse friend. Apparently, she performed field triage on 3 men during the incident, saved at least 1 life. Of course she had. Elena couldn't stop being who she was, even in the middle of a war zone. But later, after the nurse left, Marcus handed him an envelope. Found this in Elena's things at the hotel. She asked me to give it to you if things went wrong. The paper was cheap, the handwriting Elena's careful script, dated the day before the attack. Matteo, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Probably dead, possibly something worse. I'm writing this in case Carlo succeeds, in case I don't get to say these things to your face. I need you to know I never blamed you for what happened 3 years ago. The warehouse, the explosion, all of it that was the world you lived in. Not your fault. I chose to love you despite that world, and I don't regret it. You gave me Luca. That one gift makes up for all the pain. But I also need you to understand why I hid. It wasn't just fear. It was hope. Hope that if I stayed away, if you didn't know about your son, you might find a way to leave that life. Might become someone who didn't have to sleep with a gun under his pillow. I wanted better for you, even if it meant I couldn't be part of it. Now you know about Luca, and that hope is gone. You'll try to protect him, and that protection will expose him to the same violence that's haunted your whole life. I don't know how to fix that. Maybe there is no fix. But if I don't survive this, I need you to promise me something. Give Luca a choice. When he's old enough, let him choose whether to be part of your world. Don't force him into the family business. Don't let him become you unless it's what he truly wants. Let him be free in a way you never were. And Matteo, thank you. For loving me. For trying. For being a father even though it terrified you. In another life, in another world, we could have had everything. Maybe we still can. But it requires something I don't think you're ready for. Walking away. I love you. I always have. That's the tragedy and the gift. Elena. Matteo read it 3 times, each word cutting deeper. She understood him better than he understood himself, knew his patterns, his fears, his fundamental nature. And she'd been right to hide, right to protect Luca from him. But she'd also been wrong about one thing. He was ready. He'd been ready since the moment he'd held his son and felt the future collide with the past. Ready to walk away, to change, to be something other than the monster he'd become. The empire he'd built meant nothing without them. Power was hollow. Revenge was empty. Only love, messy, complicated, dangerous love, gave anything meaning. Marcus noticed his expression. You're thinking something stupid. Probably. Matteo folded the letter carefully. How fast can you liquidate assets? What? The legitimate businesses, the investments, the real estate, everything legal. I want it converted to cash and trusts. Set up accounts for Elena and Luca. Make sure they're taken care of forever. And the illegal operations? Sell them. Distribute them. I don't care. Give territory to the Santoros if they want it. Gift the dock operations to Antonio's crew. Just get me out. Marcus stared. You're serious? Completely. You'll make enemies. People will see it as weakness. Try to exploit it. And you can't just walk away from this life, Matteo. You know too much. You've done too much. Then I'll make a deal. Leverage my knowledge against my freedom. Threaten to bring down everyone if they touch me or my family. But I'm done, Marcus. I've been dead for 3 years. Elena and Luca. They're my chance to come back to life. I'm not throwing that away for an empire built on corpses. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. Donato would have killed you for this. Good thing he's already dead. I'll need 6 months, maybe a year. It's complicated, unwinding everything you've built. I've got time. Just make it happen. After Marcus left, Matteo lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight lift from his chest for the first time in years. The future was uncertain, dangerous even. But it was a future with Elena and Luca in it, and that was worth any risk. He just hoped Elena would believe him when he told her. Hoped she'd give him one more chance to prove he could be the man she needed. The man he'd once been, before the world taught him to stop believing in redemption. Elena came to the hospital that evening, leaving Luca with trusted guards. She looked exhausted, haunted by what she'd done to save them. Matteo knew that the weight of taking a life, even in self-defense, changed people. You read the letter, she said quietly, sitting beside his bed. Yes, I meant every word. I know. Matteo reached for her hand. She hesitated, then took it. I'm leaving, Elena. Leaving the business, the empire, all of it. I'm getting us out. She laughed, but it was bitter. You can't just leave. That's not how this works. Watch me. I've already started the process. 6 months, maybe less, and we'll be free. New names, new lives, somewhere far from Naples and everything that's hurt us. They'll never let you go. They don't have a choice. I've built leverage, insurance, evidence that could destroy everyone I've ever worked with. It's mutually assured destruction. They leave us alone, or the whole house of cards collapses. Elena studied him, searching for lies. Why now? Why after all these years? Because I finally have something worth living for again. He squeezed her hand. You were right in the letter. I've been dead since that warehouse. Going through motions, building an empire because I didn't know what else to do with all the rage and grief. But then I found you, found Luca, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to be alive. It's not that simple. It is that simple. Love makes everything simple. It's fear and pride that complicate things. And I'm done being afraid, done letting pride destroy what matters. Matteo pulled her closer. I love you, Elena. I love our son. And I want a life where I can walk him to school without bodyguards, where I can kiss you without checking for threats, where we can be boring and normal and happy. If that means giving up everything I've built, so be it. Tears slipped down her cheeks. You really mean this? Every word. I'm done being a monster. Let me be a man again. Let me be a father. Let me be yours. She was quiet for a long time, and Matteo felt the weight of 3 years pressing down on them both. All the pain, the secrets, the violence. It would have been easier to walk away, to let the past stay buried. But love was never easy. It was messy and hard, and required more courage than any battle. Finally, Elena spoke. If we do this, if I let you back into our lives completely, you have to promise me something. Anything. No lies. Ever. Even if the truth hurts, even if it's dangerous. I can't survive another betrayal, another disappearance. If we're in this together, we're all the way in. No holding back. I promise. Complete honesty, no matter what. And Luca comes first. Always. If a choice comes down to him or your pride or your empire, he wins. He always wins. You both do. Matteo meant it with every fiber of his being. Elena leaned down, kissed him softly. It tasted of salt and promise, of second chances and impossible hope. When she pulled back, she was smiling through tears. Then okay, we'll try. We'll build something new together. The next months were chaos. Matteo dismantled his empire piece by piece, carefully ensuring everyone got a share, that no one felt cheated enough to retaliate. He met with rivals, former enemies, people who'd wanted him dead for years, and he offered them the only thing more valuable than revenge: peace. Some accepted, some didn't. Matteo dealt with threats as they arose, but always within bounds. No more killing unless absolutely necessary. No more torture. He was changing, trying to be worthy of the future he'd glimpsed. Elena moved back into the rebuilt villa with Luca. Slowly, carefully, they rebuilt trust alongside the walls. Matteo learned to be a father, not just the fun weekend parent, but the one who handled bedtime battles and homework struggles. He was terrible at it initially, but he learned. He changed. 6 months after the attack, Marcus delivered the news. You're out. Clean. I've distributed everything, paid everyone off, and destroyed the last of the evidence linking you to anything illegal. As of today, Matteo Romano is a retired philanthropist, with a mysterious past and too much money. What will you do? Matteo asked. Marcus shrugged. I've got options. Maybe I'll follow your lead. Get boring. Settle down. He offered his hand. It's been an honor working with you. They shook, and Matteo felt a chapter close. The violent, bloody years were finished. What came next was unknown, terrifying, and absolutely worth it. That evening, he proposed to Elena properly. On the terrace where they'd first rekindled their love, with Luca as a witness and Naples spread out below them like a promise. I'm not the man you fell in love with, he said, ring in hand. That man died in the warehouse. But I'm trying to be someone better, someone who deserves you and Luca. I'm trying to be someone who builds things instead of destroying them, and I want to do that with you by my side. Will you marry me? Elena looked at the ring, at Luca bouncing excitedly, at Matteo's scarred hands and uncertain face. You're right. You're not the man I fell in love with. You're someone who fought through hell and came out the other side still capable of love, still capable of change. That's harder. That's braver. Is that a yes? She laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound Matteo had ever heard. Yes. Yes. It's a yes. Luca cheered. Matteo slipped the ring on her finger, pulled her close and kissed her as the sun set over the city that had taken everything from them, and somehow, against all odds, given it back. The house by the sea was modest compared to the villa. White walls, blue shutters, a garden where Luca played with a patient dog named Bruno. No guards, no walls, just a family, living quietly in a small coastal town where no one knew their past and no one asked questions. Matteo woke each morning to sunlight and Elena's breathing beside him. He made coffee while she showered, got Luca ready for school, packed lunches, did all the mundane tasks that once seemed impossible. He volunteered at the local community center, teaching at-risk kids about second chances. Sometimes, late at night when he couldn't sleep, he'd walk to the beach and stare at the water. The memories still came: warehouse explosions, gunfights, the weight of bodies he'd buried. He carried those ghosts and would until he died, but they no longer defined him. Elena understood. She had her own ghosts, the man she'd killed, the years of hiding, the constant fear. But together, they were learning to live with the past instead of being consumed by it. Luca was happy. He knew some of their history now, the kid-appropriate version. He knew his papa used to have a complicated job, and that they'd all been in danger once but were safe now. He accepted it with the resilience of children, more interested in his toy dinosaurs than in things that happened before he could remember. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Elena leaned against Matteo's shoulder. "Do you miss it? The power? The control?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "Old habits die hard. But then Luca laughs. Or you smile at me, and I remember why I left. This is better. This is real. What if they come back? Your old life? Then we handle it. Together. But I don't think they will. I'm boring now. Not worth the effort." Elena laughed. "You'll never be boring. Damaged, complicated, occasionally infuriating, but never boring. I'll take that." They sat in comfortable silence as night fell, and Luca called from inside, wanting help with some new dinosaur arrangement. Matteo went to him, father to son, and in that simple moment felt more powerful than he ever had running a criminal empire. He'd been a mafia boss. He'd been a monster. He'd been dead in all the ways that mattered. But now, here, in this small house by the sea with Elena and Luca, he was something more important. He was alive. He was home. And he was finally, impossibly, free.